Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Pretty much everybody in the audience here knows me already. My name is Amanda, for those who don't, especially for those watching online. Thank you for tuning in. I'm a survivor of human trafficking, and until I met John here, I didn't know that. So while tomorrow is actually my 10-year anniversary of freedom from human trafficking, and this is a very big deal to me, tonight isn't about me. Tomorrow is, don't get me wrong. But tonight is all about these wonderful people that are sitting up here beside me, because they're the ones that helped me to recognize what was going on in my own life and what it was that I needed to overcome. I wouldn't be here without these people. So, thank you. And I want to take a moment for each of them to be able to introduce themselves, talk about why they're here, who they're with, and what it is that they do.
Hello, you guys hear me okay? I'm Holly Obram. I'm with Covered Colorado. I'm the Survivor Advocacy Director. And Covered does case management for sex trafficking survivors 18 and up.
I'm John DeYoung with Shift AI. This is really thundering. So, and we are in prevention and education of sexual exploitation and human trafficking.
Hi, my name is Krista, and I'm with Girl Above, and I'm John's wife. And we work with teenage girls mostly and their parents to work on mental health and self-esteem.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. So in my travels, since learning about what human trafficking is and that I was actually a victim of that many years ago, I've come across a lot of myths and untruths that I'd like to uncover and shine a little light on. I know this is something that all of us sitting up here, are something that we battle constantly. There's a lot of falsehoods out there, and we need to kind of take that curtain back and expose it for what it truly is. I mean, just in getting prepared for tonight, I Googled the definition of human trafficking. Google's definition is vastly different from that of the Department of Homeland Security. Google says the unlawful act of transporting or coercing people in order to benefit from their work or service, usually forced sex or labor. And the Department of Homeland Security breaks it down to human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex. And I know all of us up here are familiar with both of these definitions, and we know that one is going to be far more true than the other. Google actually has it wrong. But a lot of people don't understand what it means to be forced into something by force, fraud, or coercion. So I've got 3 panelists. I thought it might be kind of fun to have each different person take a topic, and I'm going to have Holly pick first.
In regards to force, fraud, and coercion. Okay, I will tackle coercion. I feel like that's a lot of times the most difficult to identify. Coercion can be very sneaky. Traffickers are very sneaky. They are masters at finding somebody's vulnerabilities and preying on those. So they may prey on their hopes and dreams. They may pull them into their dreams. They may pull them in, tell them they love them, gain their victims' trust. Coercion is very sneaky. It can disguise itself as love. You know, there's such thing as trauma bonding, Stockholm syndrome, things that keep someone who's being trafficked very near to that person, has a relationship with their trafficker, feels very close to their trafficker. So coercion is very, very sneaky, because I think someone who's being trafficked sometimes does not realize that they're even being trafficked because of the dynamic of that relationship.
I'm going to take force. There's a lot of different ways that people are getting trafficked when you're dividing it between labor and sex trafficking, but today we're talking just about sex trafficking. And so a lot of predators and the pimps and the traffickers are considered what they call guerrilla traffickers. So they're the ones who are going to use force, aggression, and blackmail to get their victims and hold their victims in a very, very entrapped way. So, you know, we work with, we are educated with also the FBI and a lot of law enforcement. And I was talking to one of the law enforcement that works with Shift, and they're on my board. And he's like, I've seen these guerrilla traffickers strip the girls naked, put dog collars on them, chain them up, put them out in the snow, freezing, and beat them so they will submit to their demands. And force can come in a lot of different ways, but that is a guerrilla. It's really sort of like this guerrilla tactic of I'm going to maybe use coercion or other ways to get you in, but when I get you in, I may be just a guerrilla trafficker, and I'm going to use force to make sure you stay enslaved on my time, on my dollar. And that, so it's rough. It's very. I've heard crazy stories of young women getting just beaten, taped, blindfolded, encaged, and all of that. But that is one way that the traffickers actually utilize their force upon the women as well as they entrap them.
So, on the topic of fraud, because we're talking about sex trafficking and not labor trafficking, I'm sure there's a lot of fraud that goes on in that. But specifically with what we're seeing right now with like adolescents on social media, teenagers, we have to remember that people can present themselves however they want. So that's one way that a predator can be fraudulent, is to present themselves as somebody else. And so maybe a 14-year-old girl thinks she's talking to a 14-year-old boy online, and really, you know, it's a 58-year-old male in a different state. So fraud, that would be one example. And just presenting yourself as somebody you're not. Maybe you're actually dating someone and they've boyfriended you, and they're telling you they love you and they have this bright future for you, and then all of a sudden they switch and you find out that they don't have your best interest at heart, and then you find that you're trafficked. So fraud is, that's an example of relational fraud. I'm sure you know many more, but that would be just a few examples.
Thank you. And I mentioned earlier something about myths, about how we all have to pretty much constantly deal with battling these different myths. In everything that we do, can each of you talk briefly about one of the myths that you heard and what your response is to it, and maybe help to clear the air? I'm going to let John start with this one.
I'm starting. I think one of the myths that I'm passionate about, dismembering and slowly revealing truth one at a time, is that pornography is not involved in human sex trafficking. Pornography is the key to human sex trafficking. And pornography isn't as damaging, or porn is normal for boys to watch. It's abnormal, 100,000%. If there was such a percent, I would say it's 100,000% abnormal to watch another human objectify, abuse, and use and rape somebody else on camera with lights. And then while the viewer's watching that, thinking that they're separated enough from it that arouses them to whatever they personally want to have as well. And so when we think about pornography, the act of pornography, general pornography, there's a few, here's another one. The girls want to do it. They make a ton of money at it. That's absolutely not true as well. I don't know of any young girl that woke up one morning as a middle schooler saying, I just can't wait to have that career. It's not something that we do. It's just as much as a buyer, right? A buyer's not like waking up, he's a 13-year-old boy playing soccer or football and comes home and goes, oh, I can't wait till I'm 55 years old and buying young girls. These aren't things that we think and dream of doing. But as sex trafficking through coercion and fraud and force and just life circumstances and running into these risks and getting into the thing, you can fall into some of these things along the way. And so porn actually hunts the vulnerable boys and girls who are going to go into these situations and get in the wrong situation. And so porn does that. And so porn, in my personal definition of what I know about it and experiencing it and studying it and researching it and talking to other people about it and working with nonprofits, is trafficking, right? I mean, you could maybe say it's a degree or two off, but a degree or two off is 98% absolutely true. And so I think that a lot of men and women who are watching porn, or the society or culture today, is saying, porn's normal, right? They're trying to normalize pornography into society. And when you have 95% young boys watching pornography, right now statistics are saying American young girls, about 60% are watching porn. You're creating a culture that's going to normalize sexual abuse, rape, and all of these things. And it's just going to exasperate and increase sex trafficking versus decrease sex trafficking. So a lot of people are like, yeah, porn's okay. I don't agree, 100%, and it's not okay. I don't think it's normal. I'm also a filmmaker, right? I watched porn when I was younger, but I never got addicted to pornography. But I did watch it, and it didn't quite make sense. But thank God, thank God, right? But I think that when you look at film, like producing and production and how it's actually made and recorded and then edited and then uploaded, like there's just a lot of steps in one short, small video. And when I look at that industry, I'm like, that is not normal to do that to somebody and then record it, edit it, sound engineer it, color correct it, put it online, and then sell it so that other people somehow watch it and then get separated and then have a hardening of the heart, objectify their wife or their girlfriend or their friends along the way. That's just not normal. It doesn't do that. So, yeah, I think the myth is porn's okay. I say porn is not at all okay.
No, good job. The myth that I think is really important is that trafficking only happens, out there in other countries around the world. I think ever since the movie Taken, maybe, probably before that, but it seems like that's a Thailand issue or that's an India issue. And then the movie Taken, he goes over, saves her, that whole thing. So not only is it not only happening in other countries, but it is coming so far down to being, inside your average American suburban home. And what I mean by that is, so I guess part one of the myth would be that trafficking's only out there in other countries, but then parents here think it's so much safer to have my kid inside the house than it is to have them go playing outside. Because if they do get kidnapped, it's going to be because they're outside and they get taken, off the driveway. And parents don't realize how much social media is the conduit for trafficking. And so not only is it not just out in the world in some other country, but they could be currently being groomed inside your home through their phone. So it's that close to home.
Before I get into mine, I did just want to point out on the topic of pornography, since it's come up, that pornography is definitely included in the definition of trafficking, being that it is a commercial sex act. So if somebody is benefiting off of that, third party, off of you doing that due to force, fraud, or coercion, that is also sex trafficking. So, that does actually fall right there into the definition, and it's a huge part. And I also wanted to mention that if you or someone you know, a friend, a family member, is struggling with a pornography addiction, to please reach out for help, that there are people out there who understand, who care, who are not there to judge you, but who are there to walk with you through that addiction just like they would any other addiction. So as far as the myths go, I would say one that's near and dear to my heart is that everyone who's any victim of trafficking wants to be helped, wants to be brought out of that life, is ready to, get out of their, chains that they are typically not in, run out into the middle of the street and say, hey, help me, I really need help, I'm right here, to where there are some people who identify like that. There are a lot of people, Amanda talked about it at the very beginning, that she had this story. She knew that she had been through something really awful, but as far as seeing that that was sex trafficking, she was unable to see that. That's actually part of my story as well. I'm also a survivor of sex trafficking, and it was the same thing for me. I wasn't able to identify what I had been through as trafficking until actually right around the same time you did, I think, when we met each other. Because I had such a level of abuse and brainwashing that had gone on during that time, that I fully believed everything that happened during that period of my life were my choices, that I made those choices, that I was responsible for everything, that was my guilt, it was my dirty little secret. I'm gonna bury that down here, and I'm just gonna go on my life and never talk about it. And so to actually learn and start to heal from some of this, that, oh my gosh, like, this is what happened to me. And I consider myself to be a smart, educated person, and I couldn't see it, So it just makes me think, how many other people are in this life right now, and they have no idea that this is what's going on in their life, or their family members or friends can't see that that's what's going on in their life. Because I feel like our society has sensationalized this whole vision of what trafficking looks like. It looks like the movie Taken. You're pulled out from underneath a bed, you're chained to a wall, you can't leave the room. And that's just not what it looks like, I was able to walk freely. I went home and had Christmas with my family one year. But that mental attachment that I had, there's no way I was gonna leave that guy. I thought I loved him. That's where my mind was. So that's the myth that I wanted to point out. That is one near and dear to me, is that not everyone being trafficked realizes that they're being trafficked, and not all of them are ready to leave.
I know you briefly touched on it with a lot of people don't go out and reach out for help. And that's definitely a good reason why a lot of people don't reach out for help. But what are some of the other reasons that people would not want to ask for help?
I just want to clarify that. What are some of the reasons why maybe a victim wouldn't want to ask for help? I think most people have experienced manipulation in your lifetime. You don't know what you don't know, but you think you know, And sex trafficking can be, like I said, very guerrilla, but the majority of it, honestly, is this subtle love, misdefinition of love, attachment, all the other things. And I think that we want to be loved. We want to matter, and we want to be with somebody. And when a trafficker, criminal, narcissist, manipulator, add all those together and some other things along the way, learns how to manipulate the vulnerable, or he finds a crack and he slowly puts in the water and freezes it so that crack is a little bit bigger the next time. I think that we want to give grace because it's really easy to point at a young girl and saying, well, why didn't you just leave? You know, one of the law enforcement officers we work with was just talking to me at my house, and he's like, you know, a lot of hotels and a lot of people have a hard time figuring out when a young girl comes walking into the hotel, you know, they go to the room, they do the job, they come back out of the hotel, they go right by the front desk, and then they go into the trafficker's car. Some people are like, well, why didn't she ask the desk person or the maid or whoever along the way? The law officer was saying that's the amount of control and manipulation that they have on these souls that really, you know, are in that enslaved position. And the traffickers take that vulnerability of wanting to be loved, like we all want to be loved and we all want to be something, and they exploit it to its farthest reaches, and then they go a little bit farther so that it seems impossible, and or I love them so much, or something along that way. And so they manipulate just our inner soul so deeply, and it rips it apart. And so there's so much fear and other things. I was not a victim, so I have not experienced what these two ladies have experienced. And so I could not imagine the amount of manipulation, control, and fear for these young ladies to not just sort of step away, or the confusion of love, or whatever it is in that sense. And so I think we have to be very careful to not point at someone and go, well, just call 911, right? Because that would be like it could be a simple answer, but that actually is not that's complicated as well. That's a very complex situation. And so it's very complex. There's 1,000 layers, and I think we need to give grace, a lot of grace, to these victims in the situation that they're in.
So on that note of why it's complex to call 911, when we were first learning about trafficking, I think one of the things that caught me the most off guard was how the laws do not always protect the victim, and how the perception, the preconceived notion that a lot of time law enforcement has is against the victim. And so it can cost a lot, emotionally, financially, all of the things, to actually get the help that you would need. And so, you know this, what was it, like just recently within the last few years?
2016. I think she's talking about Colorado just made it illegal to traffic minors. In 2016, there was a law that was released about it being child abuse. It wasn't really defined as child abuse prior, which made it very difficult for us to rescue minors at that time. And there's just so much, you know, there are great law enforcement officers out there. Trust me, we know a ton of them. We love them. We love law enforcement. But there's so much more education to be had, laws to be changed, because we do need to come and protect these young victims and these women or boys along the way, because the traffickers don't want their products to leave.
And then another thing we were learning is just in the mindset of these law enforcement officers still being old school enough to think like, well, the prostitutes are prostitutes. They want this, they've chosen it. And like you highlighted, sometimes you're not that eager to get away. But it makes it really hard to feel like you want to help someone when the law is against you and when they don't want the help and when, the pimps are out for you. So there's a lot internally, like John was saying, this desire to be loved, probably a lot of the shame around it, how you owned, like, this was my thing, so therefore I have to just own that. And then all these legal barriers to where we can't actually protect women. So
I'm actually going to add a little something to this tonight, too. In my own personal situation, when I was in Scotland, I didn't know there were resources available. Nobody told me. Why would they? I was there with somebody that I had gone over to get married to. I was supposed to be living my happily ever after, and I was manipulated, lied to, fraud, force, coercion, all three. And I ended up in the world of trafficking, and I didn't have a way out. I also didn't have any family. I didn't have any friends. I was completely isolated. And that happens to so many victims. They get completely isolated from everyone and everything they've ever known. And they don't know how to ask for help. And that was my reason. So on to the next question. I know there's a million different statistics out there when it comes to human trafficking. Which one has been the most shocking for you? I'm going to start with Krista.
the most shocking, the most shocking one for me is actually the 6 out of 10 girls using pornography. Because I'm working with adolescents, so one, it really pertains to the clientele that I'm with, but also I think it says something about how far we've come in the fact that, like, just historically it was kind of a guy's thing. That might be a judgment, but I think it's true. And now that girls are getting into it with a completely different intention, you know, most of the time it's to learn about what the boys want and what they should be doing sexually, and I think that that's really alarming to me. So the 6 out of every 10 girls and 9 out of every 10 boys, just the sheer amount of young children watching porn, I think is alarming and terrifying, especially since they have it, you know, on their phone, in their pocket, and a lot of times the age of entry is like 8 to 11 years old. So you have these really little undeveloped minds trying to navigate and perceive adult issues. And so that's really hard.
I think, can I say 2? Is that okay? I don't want to be greedy. Okay. My first one, it shocked me about human trafficking, is I discovered that sex trafficking was happening in America. And in 2015, when I was first exposed to international sex trafficking, the statistic was about 20 plus million human trafficked victims around the world, labor and sex. Now it's 40 plus million or whatever. And I remember standing on a corner in India, one street corner in Calcutta, one city, one street corner. And the corner I'm standing on has over 50,000 trafficked victims in the red light district right next to me. And I'm looking around at this whole street corner. I'm seeing Indians walking everywhere, businesses. And in Calcutta, there's over 20 million, 25 million people in this one city. And at that time, I was like, there's got to be more than 20 million globally. Because I'm on one city, one corner, and in this one red light district, there's over recorded 50,000 women and boys selling themselves for sex on this one, in about an 9-block situation. So that was huge. And then when they came out recently with 40 plus, I think there's even more. I think it's really hard for human race to go, how is there 40 million plus? I think it's close to 100. That's just, I've been to Cambodia, Thailand, I mean, I've been to over 31 countries, and there's not a corner where I ever standing there going, there's more than 40 million. There's more than 40 million. That's one. The second one was when we did our first shift, Chris, the law enforcement officer that spoke, we had done our first shift conference, and I was learning about trafficking here. And he mentioned something that just threw me because I was a high school teacher at the time at Valor Christian High School. And he's like, the average age of trafficked children in the U.S. is 12 to 14. And I was like, what? 12 to 14? That's the average age. And then the other one that I found out as I was investigating more was another statistic that really threw me was 9 News did a short story on the youngest at that time. This was maybe a few years ago, maybe in 2017 or 18. The youngest rescued victim of sex trafficking in Denver, Colorado. This is rescued 3 months old. We don't know the entry date, but we do know the exit date. And that, like, just, it blew my mind, broke my heart, shattered everything that was about me. Yeah, so that's rough. Because I used to think, when you think sex trafficking, I think most people think adult prostitutes. Not a 12-year-old, not your niece, not your cousin, not your nephew. So, not your baby. Babies, these are babies that people are raping. These are babies that people are raping, so.
I agree. That's obviously really shocking when you hear about kids. It covered, even though we work with adults 18 and up, I would say the majority of, right now we happen to have all women in our program, do also have children. I would say the majority of them do have kids. And so we see that happen. We see that happen where, the mother is pregnant, and then next thing you know, she has the baby, and they're taking pictures of the baby, or they're, so I think as sick it is that traffickers do see that they can make even more money off of children. And so there's, we definitely see that kind of go through the cycle of if they have the mother and they're trafficking her, that they will also then, start to take advantage of their children. One of the statistics, I don't know if it's necessarily shocking to me, but that I did want to share is that, so there's an organization called the Avery Center. They're here in Colorado, and it's an amazing survivor-led organization. I trust their statistics probably over anyone else's, especially here in Colorado, because they're here. And they had a study done in 2019, and they found 100,000 different unique ads online for prostituted individuals. And their academic estimates from that is that 90% of those ads were persons being trafficked. So it's not always as it sees of, oh, this is her choice, she's doing it. You might see a photo of someone smiling. Chances are somebody that is being trafficked is out, smiling and talking to people. That's their job, is to be charming to, the buyers, right? So I think that can be very misleading, when you see somebody that's smiling, but, really behind the scenes, who is in control of that money, who is in control of their mind, who is, is this woman or man, boy, doing this by choice. And what that study shows is, for the most part, they are not.
So I know we're running low on time here because I know there's some folks in the audience and some folks up here that have stuff they need to go do. So we're just going to have two last questions. One of them is, what's your best safety tip for parents, for kids, for anybody? How can they protect themselves? How can they help somebody else?
I think the best safety tip that I would have for parents, at least right here in the location that we are in Colorado, South Denver, is to just be very aware of what your kids are doing online, and that it's okay to be involved with their social media, know what apps they have, know who they're talking to, and know how they present themselves online. I think that's a really important safety tip. The second part of that would be to really teach your kid what their values are and how to discern when those values and those boundaries are being crossed. Because if they don't have the spidey senses to know this is a bad person and this is a predator, then they're in a really compromised situation. So if they can be able to identify bad guy, good guy, all of that, now we know it's hard because they're encountering fraudulent people online, but it helps.
So I think the greatest safety tool that we can give our kids, and I'm saying this as a mother, that just have those difficult conversations. Like, we have to open this doorway of not being afraid to speak to, our 10-year-old and be afraid to say the word sex because it might be uncomfortable, it might be inappropriate. We have to start having these conversations with our kids. And even though it sucks that we have to have it with them so young, we have to have them, because 10-year-olds online, they will be approached by a trafficker. They will. Or by somebody trying to, at the very least, get them to send pictures, or, it's out there, and unfortunately, even if we don't allow our kids to have social media, even if they find a way, no matter what parental control app you have. And I have a couple. It's almost like a part-time job, and you have to be really tech savvy to even know what your kids are doing online. And, I still don't know the full extent on it, but I try to keep my finger on it as much as I can. But that's not a fail-proof system. The only fail-proof system that I see to protect our kids is to teach them what this is, to teach them. Our kids all know not to go jump into the van with the guy that's offering them candy at the park that looks really creepy, that's missing a couple teeth. Our kids know that. But do all of our kids know that, hey, I just got this friend request from this cute boy at the middle school that's also here in my same neighborhood. Here's this picture of him. Oh my gosh, he's kind of cute. He's saying he knows some of these same people that I know. To say, if you don't actually know that person, you have no idea who's behind that profile. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just, opening up that box and having these difficult conversations. It's scary, it's dark, but that's the only defense we can give our kids, is to educate them so that when we're not there with them, they know what to do, and they know where to go for help, and they know when something's not feeling right and there's a red flag.
I concur with both completely. Prevention, I think, is how we're going to change history, right? Prevention is how we're going to change history. If we were to prevent some of these other, what we call evil men in our history, if we would have been able to love them and educate them or whatever, we would not have had some of the wars that I think we would have had. I think prevention is a huge way of changing history. And so what I was thinking about from the question is safe spaces for these conversations that are very difficult to have. And not everyone feels equipped to have the conversation. And some parents probably feel, I'm so far behind. My dad was so far behind, trust me. He was really behind. And if you're having a conversation with a 12-year-old about sex, maybe just have the assumption they probably have seen some pornography along the way. It is difficult to have some of these conversations, but you have to have them. The other thing I think is kind of educate yourself. You can go online and you can, search and ask, Covered or Girl Above or Shift or other people and saying, hey, are there apps out there that I have to be particularly, I just have to know a little bit more about, like the new Face app, right? Like people, and other apps, or are there conversations that kids are having today or TikTok things that they're involved in or whatnot? Do I need to know some of this stuff? Now, parents, you don't have to be experts at TikTok and doing all those things, but is it okay to be educated in these areas? Yes. And then asking questions and creating this safe space to have conversation with your children. They are going to be very difficult. And, my parents, if this was right now and I was like 14 years old, I already knew about sex. I already seen Playboy at that time in Penthouse. I'd already masturbated. I'd already done all the things that my dad's sitting down going, all right, John, let's have that birds and bees talk. And it lasted about 34 seconds and he walked away and I was like, all right. But if you could create that space and really step into the difficult areas and have those difficult conversations, and they're not just always about sex, they're about core values. They're about what do you believe in? What are you gonna stand for? Because if you stand for nothing, then you can be moved by everything. And so, walking into those conversations I think are very, very valuable. And that preventative conversation is actual love. It's a love conversation with your child that actually prevents them from stepping into those vulnerable areas where they could slip in through the cracks a little bit, and you want to just do that. You don't want to, pin them up or, keep them in their rooms, but having a space where they can come down and say, hey, this is what kids are saying at school and stuff, and this is what I'm struggling with. Can you help me with just that? That alone, whether it's about sex or whether it's just about bullying or all these other things I can deal with, that is gonna really, really, really strengthen your children and the next generation.
Well, it is just about 7 o'clock, so we're going to be wrapping this up. But my last question is just one more time to really shine the spotlight on the people that have done so much to change my life. Where can people go to learn more about your organizations and how they can either donate to your cause or to get involved?
Well, as I said in the beginning, the name of the organization that I'm working with is Covered. A lot of our stuff out there says Covered Colorado, which is not our official name, but I feel like most people know us as that. So, and that happens to be our website, so it's coveredcolorado.org. We do have a table at the back of the room with some various materials if you'd like to pick anything up there. We're on social media. Like I said, if you search Covered Colorado, you can almost always find us. Our logo has been flashing off and on up here, big rectangle, you can't miss us. And we do have trainings for volunteers. We have all sorts of opportunities where even if you're someone who, may not have the time to volunteer, or maybe that's just not your wheelhouse, or, we have so many other opportunities and needs that we have within the organization. Even being a monthly donor, is one of our biggest needs right now. We do not have our own housing yet, which is one of our very, very biggest needs. We need housing so badly. Becoming a monthly donor involved like that really helps us out a lot as well. But yeah, coveredcolorado.org.
You can find my organization. It's Shift, SHIFT, AI.org. The AI stands for Algorithm Intelligent. So we're in a really cool situation here. Amanda is on my board of advisors. We're looking at prevention in a new way. So what we're developing is a platform that is highly unique, utilizing algorithms and technology to create a personalized, curated training program for people online. So for instance, if a mother or a family wants to know a little bit more about how do I talk to my son about pornography and social media, it will meet you where you're at, ask you some very specific questions, and then it will curate out of our database of all the information we have, videos, and we use a lot of film. I'm a filmmaker, but I also understand that media can really translate so well. And we're going to do a lot of curated training on there. And so what it does is it listens to who you are, meets you where you're at, asks you what you want and where you want to go. Then it will actually develop a training program specifically to you. You're a small business owner. You want to know, how do I just identify what's going on in my business? If I'm a salon owner, or if I have something where people are having, there's traffic coming through my business, I can put that in as well, and it will curate how to identify that. If you're just someone who's like, hey, I just want to volunteer, and these are the things that I want to do, then it will point you to organizations in the area, or it'll use geo-tracking nationally to try to get you to a place where you can do some education, the proper education, and volunteer in that. And so our thing is we really want to create something that is customizable, because you want something very specifically, right? Training to you. All training is great, but not all training is for everybody at the same time, right? And so that's what we're building right now. It's gonna take a little while. We just started maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. So we're just at the beginning stages. And so we're just in our funding stage where we're creating and we're looking for partners to help us with the platform, as well as donors to come alongside us and help fund this thing that is going to prevent millions of children from falling into trafficking into the future. And then educate families. You want to be, you're a family member that's like, hey, I just want to know the apps. Here are the apps. I want to know how I can help with Covered. Here's how you help with Covered, and call them right now, right? And so those are the things that we're going to be developing. So our algorithm will listen to who you are, meet you where you're at, and then take you down the journey that you need to go.
Did you tell people how to donate?
You can go to shiftai.org and donate. Yes, thank you.
So I'm Krista with Girl Above, and we are a partner organization with Shift. We work very closely together. And Girl Above right now so you can find us at girlabove.com. And we are working on bringing curriculum into high schools for parents and teenagers. We've built a 14-week mental health course that helps teenagers get to the root of what their problems are and help them peel back the layers of that onion of adolescence, if you will. And then we go into schools and talk to parents about the hard stuff. So very much like she was saying, these are conversations we don't want to have, but we have to have. And so part of what we do is help families build a strong enough foundation relationally to where these conversations don't feel so weird. So you can get involved in what we're doing by going to check out girlabove.com. We also have a podcast for parents that talks about a lot of this stuff, in addition to many, many more things. But John's been on there a few times talking about the porn topic, the sex trafficking thing. So that is Girl Above Parents podcast. And then you can reach me directly at krista@girlabove.com.
How do they donate?
You can donate on the website, girlabove.com.
And of course, if you have questions about me, you want to know more about my story, I did just write my autobiography. It's officially published now. It's in paperback and hardcover. Comes out in Kindle version tomorrow. It's called Custom Justice, available on Amazon or through my website, detailedpieces.com. But I just want to say a great big thank you to everybody up here tonight. You guys, each of you have changed and impacted my life in a huge way, and I'm completely just blown away and honored to have each of you sitting up here beside me. I cannot imagine a more powerful and more personal way for me to celebrate 10 years of freedom. So thank you.